I felt like God had a plan for me that was more than what it had my family's experience, and I kind of just chased after that. You can't. It's easy to take the easy road, and you gotta take the hard road most of the times.
And you're rewarded in the end because you got the beautiful fiance, and
that was luck. That was luck. That was luck.
Hey, what do they say? Luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I mean, if you plan to fail, you fail to plan. Fail to plan, you plan to fail. Sorry,
you
got that
sort
backwards.
of got that wrong,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, wow, I didn't plan that out, so that's why I failed at it.
No, that's very true.
So yeah, I mean, it's awesome. It's easy to take the status quo, and you just gotta be the person that you want to be. Don't fall victim to easiness.
I'm using a gym timer for the try to keep me on track. I think it's kind of funny because it does a really intense countdown. Y'all ready for it? All right, give it a minute. It's like a CrossFit countdown. I probably need to get a normal app.
Wow. That was intense.
That was.
Hey, welcome to Generation Giants podcast. My name is Kyle. Welcome to the show. I'm with my friends Juan Gonzales and Brent Jones.
Yep.
Two of my friends, two of my brothers from my small group through Seacoast Church. And we're going to be talking about a book that we just did a book study together on called Wild at Heart by John Eldredge, subtitled Discovering the Secret of a Man's Soul. Pretty deep. So I'm excited about the conversation. Dude, I thought the study went really well. How'd you guys enjoy the small group study overall?
I mean, yeah, I thought it was awesome, really. I mean, this book is deep and goes into a lot of different topics that are relevant to especially guys our age. I think we're in the transition period between, like, coming out of teenage years, right out of college, and then transition into real life. So
yeah, because we're basically all in our mid-20s to 30.
Right. I mean, got a lot out of it, I think, as far as experiences everyone's faced and learning from that, and just a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a discussion starter because I remember that one time we had 2 chapters that we usually do a week, but we got through a third of one question.
That day we didn't even get through one question on one of the chapters, and I didn't even talk. I just listened, which I'm totally okay with.
Yeah. So,
what was the question? What have you learned in the last 3 years?
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Very broad question.
Yeah, it's very broad.
Yep. But I don't know. You see, we had one newly found person come in and to hear his story, and to have him open up right away to us about stuff he hasn't told even his family about what he's thinking about in the future was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So just for him to have that comfort with us was nice.
Yeah, actually during the study we had 2 new guys, right? We had
2 new guys
Austin
came
and Taylor.
in, but Taylor recently got baptized.
Right. He got baptized on the men's hike.
Right.
And so this is a book that, at least at Seacoast, but I feel like fairly nationwide, is highly supported by men's groups, especially when you go on a hike. Because again, the book's called Wild at Heart. And so it's a great prepping book to understand the masculine heart, kind of what do you desire at the deepest level, why do you desire it, and the hike is just a great way to unplug all the guys. So I've gone on the hike once, and you leave your phone at home, and you just get around 20 to 30 guys in your group. And Seacoast, when I went, we had like 100 guys, and now it's up to 200 or 300. Like, there's just so many guys that go on this hike, and it's just an awesome experience. And so yeah, Taylor was one of those guys who got baptized on the hike. And I asked him, because it's always cold on these hikes. I said, how'd you do it? Wasn't it like 30 degrees? Because when I went, it got down to 17 at night. And let me tell you, getting out of that tent to go do a number 1 in the woods, you're like hustling.
Right.
Get back under that like 20 degree sleeping bag you got.
really wild at heart at that moment.
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so let's also talk about who this podcast is going to be for, right? So obviously it's going to be for guys, right? Do you guys see a certain age limit to who this episode is going to be for?
I can only see the low end, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's like, I don't know, teenagers or maybe even a little bit lower than that are trying to find their identity, because we all know those phases in our lives where we try to find our identity, and I think the first one starts like right around 10 to 12, that area.
Yeah.
And, going into high school.
Yeah. I think there's probably not a real limit. I mean, even if you're, a young boy, there's parts of the book that hit on that, as far as being a father,
right,
to the young boy. So, I mean, if you look at it that inversely, that way, then it can affect any age. But I think it's relevant to anyone who's ready to find out, what it's like to live like God intended you.
Right.
If you're not at a point where you've ever experienced that or understood that, then it's going to hit you. So, but I definitely think the biggest opportunity is for the kind of kids in middle school, high school that are really getting into the challenges and everything that comes with that age. I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Trying to figure out what a good young man is supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like. And
well, not even that. It's just when they're trying to answer that question, who am I type thing, why do I do the things that I do?
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you guys see this conversation, this book at all being for the young ladies out there?
For sure. I mean, if you want to understand what it's like to be a man or to be a guy, it's probably complicated on the outside. I don't know what it's like to try to understand. I mean, I guess I know trying to understand a woman. That's like,
dude, we will never understand.
They always say they write books for women and they're like this big, but a man is like this big. So
yeah.
Let's be honest. 9/10 of this was a filler.
Exactly.
There were a few sentences in here that really mattered.
A couple of repeats.
Chapter 12 was you write your own ending.
Chapter 12 was one page.
Total guy.
John he was like, all right. The publisher said they needed 12 chapters, and I'm just out.
But yeah, for sure, I think it could definitely be relevant.
Yeah, and as a teaser, so our small group, the guys did this, and the girls did a book called Captivating, which as a teaser we're going to be talking about in the podcast coming out next week. So we're going to get two of our girls in our group, including your fiance. So I think y'all are the only engaged couple in our group, but we've had a few married couples come into the group here and there. And so what about people's pets? Is this book for people's pets?
No. Keep your pets away.
Keep your pets away from this book.
I don't think Chuck and Brent would listen to it.
Yeah, Chuck had to deal with our study for the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
The girls and the guys.
Chuck, dogs are wild at heart. I think he talks about dogs in the book. They're built in perfection, so they don't need this book.
Yeah, dogs already know how to be wild at heart.
Dogs can carry their bone up a hill, let it roll down, get it up the hill, roll. I think he talks about that. Just fun life.
They're always happy.
No worries.
Always happy.
Yes. So dogs are already perfect. They don't need these lessons.
Exactly.
But we as guys, we're just dumb, and we need these lessons. We need to understand.
Sometimes we are not smart.
Yeah, a little thick-headed.
Yeah. So let's maybe talk about what wild at heart, as a broad topic, means to you. What is kind of the thesis, in your words, of what the author is getting at? And there's a few chapters that we're going to be kind of diving into in this podcast that we thought really resonated with us. But just hearing wild at heart, have there been any takeaways for you guys on what that means and how you can apply it better in your life?
I would say, wild at heart, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's that sense of adventure that we've all, especially like our age, has grown up, out building forts and always on a quest to better ourselves and stuff like that. Like, that's the big thing that I think Wild at Heart is the quest for adventure and just fulfillment and validation and, all that, like the wanting to be wanted thing, type thing. Mm-hmm. And you could see that all the time. It was like, if on like your pursuit of a woman, it's like, guys do get bored if it's
you
just
bored
given
so easily. And John talks a lot about boredom is like the worst thing in the world for guys. Mm-hmm. That's when problems happen. It's when temptations happen.
Yeah.
Guys especially, we're very, I think, as our nature, we're very mission driven. I think like we need purpose. We need to be doing something, building something.
Yeah. I mean, we like to be that, knight in shining armor, coming in to
give us something to fix, and we'll try to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the 3 main topics of the book are a battle to fight, an adventure to live, and a beauty to rescue, and that really encompasses all the points of the book. I mean, it talks about when you're a young boy, adding the element of danger and unknown is what really makes you come alive, and that's really what you're kind of striving for. But not only that, but making sure you're getting that from like God. At the end of the day, you're getting it from God, and then when it comes to like finding the beauty to rescue, once you do find that, it's also leading your beauty to God, and that's how you're the warrior. You're always fighting the battle for God. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. But we always, I think a big part of the book, and it always comes back to it, is the woman. I mean, if you look at creation, everything was great, but it wasn't perfect until God made the woman, and like that's what we are always striving to find, that other half of us. Yeah. So I mean, everything we do growing up in middle school, high school, it's always somewhere around like
trying to impress that lady.
How do I impress the lady? Like, if you're in the gym or you're working outside and a girl walks by, you're gonna work double.
All of a sudden, you do.
Yeah, you start Superman in it. So I think that's a big part.
And it's funny because you're like, this is gonna be so impressive to her, and then she's probably thinking, I don't care. Right. Yeah, but in our minds, it's like a really big deal.
Or she's like, show off.
Or she takes it the other way,
trying to be the warrior, and she's just looking for, someone to rescue her.
Yeah. Well, the girls definitely brought up that they want to feel secure. They want words of encouragement from men whenever we got together and talked girls and guys. But they definitely wanted action, which was a takeaway I got. Like girls like guys that are of action, not just talking about it, which is a big thing. It has to do with willpower too. Like, are you willing to fight for the ladies in your life? Could just be your mom. I mean, there's nothing wrong with loving your parents. I mean, or your sisters,
Right.
And sometimes that even gets tainted in a negative light. Like, as a man, you should be so independent that you don't show love to your family, which is the totally opposite of what we're supposed to do. We're called to live, as John puts it, in passionate freedom, which I really like. That was a good phrase that I took away. Live in passionate freedom. Live out your purpose, live out your passion, and feel free to do it.
Right.
If your passion is riding bicycles, in BMX style or something, then do it. Live with your passion and live in freedom. If your passion is to love others, which hopefully it is for everybody, then feel free to love others. And who cares if they take it the wrong way? Ultimately, you aren't responsible for how they accept your love, but that's how you influence others. That's how you, and especially with your family.
Yeah.
Yeah. I keep trying to find that passage where he talks about that quote where he says is like, the world doesn't need a man to come alive.
Oh yeah. No, I got that. Let me pull it up. That's and we'll be talking about this chapter a lot more in this episode, but he says, he's actually quoting Howard Thurman. And he says, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive. And go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And the author, John, talks about how when he read that and heard that, he was dumbstruck, because all his life, he says, he had been asking the world to tell me what I need to do with myself. When as a man, you have these passions to make change, to do awesome things, to climb great heights. That's again why the hike is such a great tool to go along with this book study that a lot of men's groups do, just going up there with nothing but living on the land, and it's up to yourself. And I'll be honest, man, there's so much security and strength too whenever you're a guy and you got 50 other guys, and you're climbing that mountain that maybe you've never even been on a hike before, that you just feel like there's nothing that can stop you guys. You feel like there's so much willpower and why power and strength and your pack of guys. You feel like you could go camp forever, regardless if it's 17 degrees outside like it was, and sometimes it rains whenever we go on these hiking trips. You just feel like indestructible whenever you get around all these manly men.
Yeah. When you conquer the elements, it helps you realize, God's beauty and creation and why he's made you the way you are. Yeah.
And I want to bring up too, so it's funny, we all serve with youth, and it's funny, I love this, but it's kind of counterintuitive. The guys in my group, 10th graders, a lot of times they like to joke around and horseplay. You know what I mean? You get those. Conlin's, who's on the camera, Conlin's like, yeah. And it's interesting because it makes you, as a leader, it makes you decide, is this something good? Should they be horseplaying? Because I think as a young man, you're taught you need to behave, and this is a lot of what's in the book. Like, you need to behave, you need to sit down, you need to listen, you need to be quiet. And as a small group leader in church, it's interesting. One could say you need to get your group under control. Mm-hmm. And I like to think of myself, and even I like to think of leaders and God in general, as, as a leader, you should be in control without controlling. Mm-hmm. Just because the group's horseplaying doesn't mean that it's out of control. Even if somebody breaks something, maybe that's on me, but hasn't happened yet. But, I actually encourage the horseplay because this is how guys relate to each other. Mm-hmm. I don't know how the girls' groups look. I don't know if they're like playing checkers or what.
You're not telling me anything new. I got 8th graders.
Yeah, and they're probably more rambunctious as middle schoolers.
First taste of testosterone, you want to question the world and rebel. Yeah, I got an interesting group, but, love them to death. When you think that you're not getting through to them is when you're actually getting through to them. And they always play like, they want to challenge the status quo and all that, but they're really taking it in, and, they might not admit it in front of the others, but they'll pull you aside and let you know, because they don't want to seem like they, the weak one who always follows the rules, and no one wants to be the teacher's pet.
Yeah. And even in that, there's something about being a cowboy, being like a renegade that guys seem to just generally be attracted to, and there's something very good in that. There's something in that can get you in a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. But going back to, applauding being a little bit rambunctious, it's interesting because it makes me think, what if I was being tested on how well my students know the curriculum? Because that's, I think, where in school, I think that's where the teachers have a really difficult time, because they're put in this position where they're not graded on this, how well the students have good internal health, or how many friends they have. The teacher is graded on how well the students know the curriculum and how well they do these tests. Mm-hmm. And it's this educational model that we're in. Not necessarily saying it's bad, but I don't think it's complete. And so whenever you spend 8 hours a day in school, and these teachers have a lot of pressure to teach you, they don't see any room to play around. Whereas in church, we're there to make sure students are whole people, and hopefully they learn something in the process. Mm-hmm. And we only get to see them maybe an hour or two a week, but I think it makes a huge impact. But I had to think about that. What if I was being tested on the curriculum of what they're learning? And I think it requires educators and leaders to take a look at how we are leading youth, because it's not necessarily all about head smarts. It's all about being complete people and being happy and finding their place in their community, at their school, or in their church.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, they're very similar. They're just like us. We have the men's hike. They have summer camp.
Summer camp. And the students in our church are starting to do a hike. They did at least one already. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we're all really just about the same. That's one thing that I'm finding. We do have some differences across the age spans for sure, and experience and wisdom. But one takeaway that I get from this book, and hearing from young people and people in their 20s, 30s, and whatever, is we all kind of have the same nature. Mm-hmm. It's just like, where are we in the process of acquiring the things that we want?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think to that point also, just like what you said with the education system, like when you try to confine anybody to a way of thinking or the rules per se, it limits their. It's just not how we're wired.
Yeah,
we're wired to be our own self and adventurous and do what we feel, But
yeah,
I think, and the book talks a little bit about the wound. I think a lot of the wounds that the book talks about in your childhood, it comes from that experience of being limited to what you want to do to a way of what you're told. But I know we'll get into that a little bit more later. But yeah, good points.
Yeah, and we're about to have to wrap up this first section. Maybe briefly describe the wound, because that is a part of the book, and we don't have too much time to dig into it, but maybe describe the wound and what that means.
Yeah, I mean, it talks about basically the book is a little generalizes that everyone has a wound from but basically their childhood. Typically it's from the father, and it could be really anything. But what I got out of it is just something that kind of stays with you and affects the way you think, the way you do things. And, I mean, it's nothing specific, but just very general topic that you kind of talk about.
Yeah, it could be like a little thing where, what was it for? I think they talked even about for girls. It's like that time where they want to be told they're beautiful, and
uh-oh,
shut up.
we gotta take our break. We'll be back here in a minute.
Wow.
Shut down.
I meant to set it to a higher time, and then we'll stop it at 20 minutes.
2, 1, lift. Get deeper in the squats. Intense.
All right, let me set that for a higher time limit. This is why I probably need a different app.
3, 2, 1, go.
Every time.
I'm gonna look for a better one.
Setting the intensity, man.
Yep.
That's my new workout countdown.
So Brent, before the break, what were you saying?
I was just saying, like, it's like little things where people like want to get validation from their father.
Yeah, and
like,
especially some of the young ladies in our group resonate with that part of the book, captivating.
Validation. It's the key word there.
Yeah, validation is the biggest thing, and sometimes if you don't validate that you're a man or validate that you're beautiful and as
from
a
girl side, usually.
Yeah. Like that can create a deep wound of, in a person, and you never know where that's going to take it, where you're going to take it. So
yeah, there's a lot of power in parents, and even just in being a sibling, and even just being a best friend. There's a lot of power in being able to speak life into your friends or into your son. And us as eventual fathers, we've got a lot of power waiting to happen, that we get to speak that life into our sons, and so that part is very much a section, both for us as everyone has a father, but also for the fathers to be life-giving fathers to their sons, because it's so important,
Yeah.
And so,
Sure.
So a big part of the book was masculinity bestows masculinity, and what do they say about femininity? Femininity arouses masculinity, right?
Yes,
Maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I'll see if I can get Christine and Kat to talk about that tomorrow.
I'm sure they will.
yeah, that's a interesting conversation.
Yeah, but masculinity bestows masculinity, right? If you want to try to be a better man, and this is a takeaway, no matter how old you are, for us, that's why we surround ourselves with each other, trying to hang out and just be around each other and do stuff together, because if you want to be a better man, you're gonna learn how to be a better man from other men, but certainly a good woman can motivate you to be a better man, but she can't necessarily make you a better man. And so there's kind of a fine line there. And that was kind of my takeaway from how John described it.
Yeah, it has to be innate. It has to be within us. Like no one can force you to do something that you don't want to do. And you could play the part, but it's ultimately going to tear you down if that's not what you want to be.
Right.
Type thing. So, I don't know. Masculinity bestows masculinity or...
Yeah.
I mean, we all look for good examples. And
Right.
it's like, to us, especially growing up, for us was our father. You know, that's the...
Yeah.
That is the example of masculinity.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about your father? Because he seems like such a great man. You want to just share some details about him?
Yeah. So for my dad was a PE teacher, wrestling coach. You know, that's how I got into wrestling. He was very compassionate, so to speak. I would say it's Proverbs 23:26 that sticks out, you know. Son, give me your heart and let your eyes delight in my ways. That was my father. That's him to a T. He had such a compassion for people, and that it didn't matter your background. He was going to see that you became the best person that you were supposed to be. And that was an example. So we lived outside DC, and, you know, DC, especially back then, had its rough parts, but he took in people that no one else would give another chance to, like the wild childs, you know, the kids that were truly wild at heart.
He kind of had an unconditional faith in others, it sounds like.
And he showed them how to channel, you know, that anger, that rage inside them, and channel it in the best way possible to eventually, you know, put them into the best situation for them. And so that was one thing. And then with women, no one, especially back then, like no one would coach women, because wrestling is a very, you know, hands-on sport. So, you know, a guy, especially that's of age, you know, showing, like, touching, like, a younger girl is a very, you know, no, even not in nowadays. So rather than face the challenge, people would just tell him no. But my dad said, I'll do it because it's in the best interest of the kid. And, you know, that led to the Olympic Committee calling him to ask about adding women's wrestling into the Olympics. And that happened. And now we have one of the girls that my dad worked with became the first gold medalist this last year for
That's awesome.
USA Wrestling. So, I mean, it goes a long way. And my father is getting inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame now.
Dude, congrats to you and your whole family, you know.
Yeah, it's a big thing. Like, so he passed away, for those that are wondering, passed away from cancer in March. But the thing with that is he was such a good example of what it is for masculinity, and that, you know, I didn't take any pain away from that. Like, I saw what he did in the community and what he meant to the community and how he affected all those people, that was such a blessing in itself. So,
yeah,
like, everyone has a purpose.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear. And, you know, and I really applaud you and your strength and in this year. You know, this year it's been a big year for you, you know, in many ways.
I think that's awesome. I mean, it's so critical. The father figure is so critical in what's the key word we're talking about? Validation for a young man. I mean, and I think probably generalizing, it's not the case where everyone has a situation like Brent's father, where it's that masculine, like, positive, look at me, what I'm doing, and follow me kind of figure. So I think that's where the wound is created in a lot of younger men. I mean, for me, I guess my father wasn't a Christian growing up until I got to be like 17 is when he found Christ. So, I was, when that happens, it's not always that you're looking for validation in the right areas. Because I think when you have a father figure that's following Christ, then they're going to lead you to Christ. And that's really where you need to get your validation from. So when you're not doing that, you're kind of looking for validation in all the wrong places. And, looking at young men and girls in today's world is kind of frightening. Like all the places they're looking for validation in the way that magazines and stuff just portray validation. The media, it's scary. And it's an epidemic in my opinion, as far as
because it's so readily available to them too now.
Yeah, and it just, men aren't masculinity is not bestowing masculinity these days. I think it's falling greatly. So I think that is the answer. I mean, we need that. We need we talked about serving and being that example, because it's just not there a lot of times.
The biggest statistic that drives me to serve and be a kingdom man. It's from the book Kingdom Man by Tony Evans.
I've heard of it. I need to read it.
Yeah, it's a good one. Is 75% of those in jail do not have a father figure, or a father figure that's rested in Christ. So it's like they're either not there altogether, or they'll come in and leave them, so that creates the wound, or they'll like beat them and just not be an example in Christ, and so that will create the wound and say, that they're not good enough. So it's like we need, as men that are found in Christ, to be able to show that example and show the blessings that we found through Christ, because these kids are so malleable and need it. So
I think as a man, a good attitude that we should have is, if I don't do it, no one's going to do it kind of attitude. That's what I think drives us to fix things. And so in teaching and leading the next generation, and everyone's got a next generation, it's up to us. I think, we're all Christians, and we believe that God kind of ordained men to be the leaders, to kind of be the head. That's no disrespect to women at all. Unfortunately, a lot of women take that in the wrong way.
That's an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But
sure. Tread lightly.
But regardless, we're called to be leaders, I think. And if we don't act, no one's going to act, should be our attitude, So as we talk about, these young people need men to bestow masculinity, we're doing what we can, but ultimately we need every man to find his place to give back and to lead, whether it's a younger brother or just a family of other young men. And if you are a young man, and I consider myself a young man, but let's say you're a teenager, try to find someone who's a couple years older than you. Yeah. And just learn from them, see what they do,
For me, it's like, I always look to sports. Like I played soccer growing up, and like always the coach was the masculine figure that I was always looking up to. And most of the time I had great coaches that were leading you in the right direction, not being like, there's some bad coaches out there for sure. Not godly at all. But try do it yourself. If you're a kid out there and you're feeling like you don't have that to look up to, like, go find it. There's resources out there. Don't just feel like you're alone. Obviously the church is a good place to start. Right. Custom and stuff. So, but yeah, it's critical.
And so let's talk about chapter 5, or begin to talk about chapter 5, because that was one of the chapters that really resonated with us, and it's titled "The Battle for a Man's Heart." And a couple quotes that are on the inside cover of the chapter is, "To give a man back his heart is the hardest mission on earth," from the movie Michael, right? So it can be difficult once a man loses his heart to gain it back. And again, this book is written from a guy who at the time was married with kids, so he was a bit older than us. And it talks about how it can be difficult, but it's so important, and it's a battle, so it takes fighting. And a lot of the book is about just being willing to fight, not necessarily being on the offense, but whenever the enemy tries to attack you or you see a problem, you got to fight back. In this chapter I underlined, I thought this was pretty interesting. He says, where to back up from? Well, I'll just start at the top of the paragraph. It says, at that moment, Blaine's soul was hanging in the balance. Then the fire came back into his eyes and the shame disappeared. Now I gave that advice to a boy I could trust who was at the time in first grade. I did not give this advice to a high school boy whose enemy might pull a gun on him. There's wisdom and context, and I underline, but we must not strip a man of strength and call it sanctification. And so that was interesting, because as men, you should be loving others. You should be wanting to make impact and doing good, and sanctification is kind of what we call in church world the process of becoming more like Christ. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we think the process to become more like Christ means you just never fight, or you just never talk back. And that can be a challenge. I definitely don't feel like I've mastered that. I don't necessarily think of myself as like a Christian cowboy, right? It's kind of tough. Christian crusader.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that's a good point in the book, that as a man, you need to be willing to fight. And that's a big part of your heart. Fight for good. Fight for what's important in your life. Fight for the people that you love. Fight for your family.
You just don't want to be a pushover. No one likes a pushover.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're living in a world of war, basically. I mean, you're going to get shot at. You don't go into a war and expect not to get shot at. It's always a fight whether it's what the biggest thing is in the book for me is the woman. It comes back to the woman.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're always battling for your heart I don't know where I'm going with this exactly, but I'm
sure Christine will appreciate you saying this. You're getting a lot of brownie points, and it's just all comes back to the woman.
Yeah, I mean,
we desire to be that knight in shining armor, and the girl desires to have that knight in shining armor.
And our validation, like our heart's validation, comes from that in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big part.
Because it lets the guy know, I am good enough to be your husband, or and lets the girl know that I'm gonna fight for you,
right,
type thing.
Exactly.
And it's like I'm gonna protect you, like I'm gonna be here for you, type thing.
Yeah.
It's probably also just the, I guess, most vulnerable place of our heart. It's the woman,
Mm-hmm.
and how probably the biggest way we can be affected is when we have that. For me, I've had wounds of like relationships.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's probably my biggest wound is like relationships, and again, finding validation in a relationship through the woman and not God. I mean, at the end of the day, we talked about it a little bit in our small group, but like the woman and the man are supposed to be leading each other to God, just like in creation. I mean, that's the goal.
That's
but when you start to validate yourself in the woman herself and what she says about you or what she makes you feel, like it's gonna fail. So always have to find that validation through Christ and battle for your heart with Christ and using the woman, using whatever it is that you have. So
yeah, because that's like, if I glorify God, I'm gonna glorify the woman that I'm seeking. And if she glorifies God, then by the process of doing that, she'll glorify me. So that should be the foundation and basis for all relationships. And it's not. And when it's not, that's when you get those deep wounds, because like you put all your faith into something that doesn't exist. And when you don't put your faith in Christ, who's the only constant in anyone's life, like you're just setting yourself up to be hurt. So
yeah,
by always going to glorify God, you're gonna glorify the person that you want.
It's good. Any other thoughts on chapter 5? as we kind of close down this section, I'll say this is on page 86. Just talking about men's strength and how it's necessary. And again, it goes back to we need to be willing to fight, and our strength is an asset. It's not a liability. And that's where I think a lot of society, at least the book makes this claim and paints this picture that society is trying to push down masculine strength. And so on page 86, I underline, strength is so essential to men is also what makes them heroes. If a neighborhood is safe, it's because of the strength of men. Slavery was stopped by the strength of men at a terrible price to them and their families. The Nazis were stopped by men. Apartheid wasn't defeated by women. Who gave their seats up on the lifeboats leaving the Titanic so that women and children could be saved? And have we forgotten it was a man who let himself be nailed to Calvary's cross? This isn't to say women can't be heroic. I know many heroic women. It's simply to remind us that God made men the way they are because we desperately need them to be the way they are. I think that's just solid.
That is.
Yeah.
I love being the hero. That's that knight in shining armor.
Do y'all ever think about, what if somebody with a gun just busted up in this public area and what you would do?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I work for the Navy, so we get active shooter training all the time.
Yeah.
And, in today's world, you're really not safe anywhere. You have all these shootings that are happening in churches.
Yeah, there's technically risks everywhere.
Yeah.
If you're going out in a public place, technically it's a risk. It might be a very low risk because we have references that say this has been safe all my life, but you never know.
Yeah, someone could be having a bad day and it triggers this to happen, so you have to be prepared. And so that's what we bring to the women, though, is if we're ready to act on that in their behalf, then they feel that security in us, especially in the world that we are facing.
Yeah. You definitely don't want to be the guy that runs away.
Yeah.
No girls are going to like that. But no,
the guy who didn't run away is going to pull his gun on you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think in that kind of situation, you're going to have the people who stay and try to fight and make resolution, and you're going to have the guys that run. And I think the identity of those two people are found in the way if they had masculinity bestowed upon them. And I think that's part of, like we said before, part of the problem with the generations coming up is you got the guys who aren't validated, and the guys who are validated in different ways. And it leads up to that kind of point where they're making, maybe it's not a shooter, but in that there's a situation that reflects that determination to make a decision. But
yeah, and then to kind of wrap things up back around, there's different forms of masculinity. So there's in the shooter example, there's that innate masculinity that's gonna attack the dude and take him out. But at the same time, when you have masculinity that's identifiable in Christ, you rationalize it more, and so you're able to make a better decision of how to take this out. If you just take the person out, you could end up killing yourself, and that does no one any good.
Yeah.
So
well, that's a good point, because there's courage, but then on one span there's, I don't know what the opposite would be, timid. Some kind of opposite of courage in the middle, and then at the end of that spectrum is rashness. Just being violent in every way, and that's not what you want either. There's still a middle ground. So that is a very good point. Just because there is a threat, whatever that is, could just be someone talking smack or whatever. It doesn't mean you just let's go take that guy out. Let's go tackle him. That doesn't mean that either.
No.
Balance.
Yeah, that is a good point. Let's take our second break. I set this somewhat correctly, so it didn't cut us off this time.
All right.
And then we'll be back here in a minute.
Awesome.
And we're back. So the other big chapter that we all resonated with was chapter 11, An Adventure to Live. Basically the last chapter, since the last chapter is one paragraph.
12. Yeah.
And so it really, to me, kind of sums the whole thesis of the book together, And that's where we talked about you need to do what makes you come alive. And so maybe let's talk about, as men, what kind of stuff do we like to do? What resonates with us? The author talks about motorcycles. I don't own a motorcycle. Does that make me a man or not? What are you guys' thoughts on, at least practically even for you and maybe abstractly, what makes you come alive as a man, and specifically for you guys?
To me, it's serving.
That's really good.
Just, so what makes you come alive? What makes you happy? Type thing. And we had a huge discussion in our small group about what John said in the book, in the chapter. It was like, if something really makes you happy, do you just, cut ties with your current job and go pursue that or not?
We talked a lot about that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a big thing, especially for our
was that your ringtone?
Yeah,
that was beautiful.
Odessa.
Is that Beyonce?
Odessa. That's a good one.
Sounded like Miley, maybe.
But no, yeah, it makes me come alive.
We've answered the question. You don't need to continue.
Yeah. But I didn't even forget what I was talking about now.
You gotta do what makes you. Well, you were saying serving.
Yeah,
you were saying also about our jobs. So we talked a lot about and this is a struggle. This is a struggle for the author. This is a struggle for us. We have desk jobs basically. Like we're not full time out in the field. We're not out fixing. We're not electricians or plumbers or something, which are frankly trades that we probably need more young men to get into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We work at a desk and we work at a computer for most of the time, and it's challenging at times.
Right.
And so we were talking about does this book is this inspiring us to just quit our job and go figure out how to live out our passion?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a conversation we had, and it's not necessarily a single answer, and there's not necessarily, you can't sum it up in 10 minutes, but kind of where we left off was, at least our jobs as desk jobs make decent money. Mm-hmm. They allow us to live out our life and pay the bills. It's some form of security. You need some form of security, I think. You can't just totally live on the wild side. You can try, but we choose not to, and that's our choice. And so we have our steady income, and that gives us the freedom to then, if we want to on the weekend, we can buy camping gear and go camping, or we can go fish, or we can go lift weights, or buy stuff. I have a garage gym, buy stuff for the garage gym.
So our situation enables us to pursue, what makes us come alive. So it depends. Like if you're in a job where you absolutely hate, waking up each day, then you got to get out of that job. But if your job is, you enjoy it somewhat or mostly, you can handle it, and it's providing you the needs that you need at the time. That's a perfect situation. But it's like God only puts you in circumstances that only you can handle, and you can find little ways of, for me, what makes me come alive is serving. So you can find little ways around your circumstances where you can serve. Like, for instance, someone at work's having a bad day, so you decide to take them to lunch. Make them. You're serving them in that ways where you're showing them respect and trying to make them happy, type thing. And then that ultimately benefits the company or whatever that you work at, because it's a better working environment, type thing. So you can always find a situation that allows you to serve or come alive. It's just your perspective on things.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. For me, it's not necessarily serving exactly. I do like to serve at times. For me, it's what makes me come alive is travel and music. I love both of those things, so when I can do them at the same time, it's awesome.
What kind of music? Reggaeton?
No. I like all music, but
Hablo.
Hablo mucho.
Petey Pablo. No, I like
Petey Pablo.
I think obviously electronic music is my favorite type of experience, but I think just in general, just it's experiences, doing something. That's what makes you come alive. Experiencing the world. It's such a big world, so getting to do something is awesome, no matter what it is. But I think it comes down to like timing also. I mean, God's timing is perfect, and if you're in conversation with God, then you know where you're at. You can be content with where you're at. So like for me, working, it allows me to make the money to do those things, and at the end of the day, like I'm content with that, and I still am able to do the things I like, but also live, which it's harder to do in this world every day. So yeah, I mean, and then one day I want to like start a business. I think that's really what is my passion. Like I want to do something.
Dude, you're gonna kill it, man. Whenever you decide, if it's what was it, Juan's Tacos or something?
1 a.m. Tacos.
1 a.m. Tacos coming to you soon.
There's a ton of taco trucks now. I don't know if you noticed, but there's like Samilia, there's Revelry Taco or some crazy.
I'll come eat your tacos.
There's like 4 or 5 taco trucks now. If I would have done it when I started saying it, it would have been huge. No, but there's not a taqueria in Mount Pleasant, and I think there needs to be one. I think it'd be a huge hit. I think one day, but I don't think it's
one day.
It's not my timing right now, so you know.
Man, Mr. Jokes over there.
Yeah, Kyle takes him when he can. He can, yeah.
I haven't called him Silent J yet.
Yeah.
Well, you just did.
Silent J.
Kyle was a Spanish construction guy for Halloween.
Yeah.
He's actually better at Spanish than I thought he would be.
Yeah.
Sí, yo sé mucho.
Yeah. I don't know.
5 años en español, man.
My dad's from Mexico, and I've minored in Spanish, took it for 7 years. I still can't speak it, so.
Y'all kept asking me questions. I kept saying like, ¿qué?
Yeah.
Mi familia allí. I just kept pointing.
It's pretty much how they talk. And by they, I mean Spanish workers. I won't generalize and say Mexican, even though most of them are.
Well, you just generalize Spanish people as they're from Spain.
But I'm allowed to do that because my name's Juan Gonzales.
One of my best friends is Hispanic, so I can say whatever.
But anyway, yeah. I mean, I think everyone's different, and you just gotta pray about it, find out what timing you're on, and don't be anxious for anything. You know, just pray about it. So
humble yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's key. And he says, you know, he says a man just won't be happy until he's got adventure in his work, in his love, and in his spiritual life. And so no matter how old you are, you can begin to figure out whatever that adventure is. Maybe it's hiking. Maybe you just love being an outdoorsy guy. The author's a very outdoorsy guy.
Very.
You know, some guys, I don't know the first thing about fishing personally. And fishing will probably never be my passion. You know?
Right.
If my sustenance depended on my ability to fish, I would starve to death. And y'all have seen my appetite.
Yeah.
So, you know, fishing is just not my thing. But I love going out and running and biking, and especially biking, because I tell people, you know, it's similar to running, but it's easier, and you get to see 3 times as much distance.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so biking, you know, is a big thing that makes me come alive. Road biking. Some people might be mountain biking. We live in the low country. Mountain biking is just not really a very accessible means for me coming alive.
Right.
But, you know, so I got into road biking for better for worse in college. I did a little bit of biking around the neighborhood like most boys do, but it was never a big thing when I was in high school. And so that's something that I recognize whenever I'm doing it. Whenever I have a season where I'm consistently going out and road biking, I'm just happier, and it's just how it is. Mm-hmm. And so you got to find what really resonates with your heart and with your soul. It doesn't have to be any one of these things. Hopefully serving in some capacity is something that you do a little bit at some point. Yeah. You know, don't just expect that everything you do is going to get compensated for. Some things you should just live because you've been given grace, you've been given opportunity that you didn't earn. You know, you didn't ask for the parents that you have, and they're probably better than you think they are. You know, in hindsight, you realize that it could have been a lot worse at the very least.
That's for sure.
And you begin opportunities, and so hopefully you should be giving back in some capacity. But you know, I also like weightlifting, but it's also just very different. You know, and I'm not exceptional at any one of these things, but I definitely like weightlifting because it's a challenge for one.
Yep.
Also, some part of me thinks that I shouldn't be good at it, so whenever I am good at it, it gives me even more satisfaction. You know, because I'm not a very large guy, and it's also kind of risk taking because there's definitely lifts. Whether I'm bench pressing alone in my garage and I don't have a spotter and I'm kind of pressing.
Sure there's some things that happen that you don't want to tell us.
There's definitely.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes you'll be bench pressing and it'll hit like the clip and you're like, oh crap, I don't.
Right. You gotta like arch your back.
You gotta press it because you feel like your life depends on it. There is some kind of risk taking too, and there's definitely lifts where I'll be snatching or something. Because in competition, I did a competition and I pulled my elbow on a snatch, and that's definitely something that I have to overcome now. Anytime I'm doing heavy weight, I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna hurt myself or I'm gonna land wrong. And so there's some form of an adventure in that really appeals to me. And maybe it's not gonna be weightlifting for every guy, but you go to the gym a lot.
Yeah, I think adventure is a good way to put it. Like I said, experiences, but it's an adventure. Like when I go travel to, Europe or go to a music festival somewhere or whatever. I mean,
and you've been to Europe several times.
Yep.
Like big trips.
Yep. Tomorrowland.
Tomorrowland.
Yeah,
Putting a plug in for Tomorrowland.
But I wanted to
Huge
go.
music festival. It's awesome.
I like DJ Diesel.
More countries represented than the Olympics there, so it's pretty cool.
Wow.
I think it's an awesome opportunity to see different cultures in one place. So, but yeah, I mean, doing something that for me, like I've always been about adventure. Like I was the first person in my family to graduate high school, so like that was not something that was expected.
That's a big deal.
It was a regular,
it's a
like
big applause.
Yeah, I mean, speak to that a little bit because there could be listeners that they have that background. I mean, what was that like?
It's awesome, really. I mean, because for me, I've always been the person that I wanted to change the footsteps of my my
family
tree. Yeah. So, and it's difficult when you don't have anybody that's done it before. I mean, if you're doing anything in life, if you don't have that example to look after, you have to kind of figure it out. So, I mean, it was awesome to kind of do that, and now, hopefully, I don't know, but hopefully everyone that's younger than me is going to follow that, which it seems to be trending that way, but we don't know.
And you're a college graduate.
Yeah. How'd you get that? Call it courage, call it motivation or something to not only graduate from high school, but then go to 4-year college?
I mean, I think it's all about who you surround yourself with. I mean, because I have friends that were in the same situation as me that didn't have any family that graduated, but they chose to go down other paths, and it's because they surrounded themselves with the people that made that the validation. Like, that's okay to do. For me, it was never okay. Like, if you don't go to college, you don't get a good job, you don't have a nice house for your family to pay for college. Like, it's just a big. I'm looking at down the road.
It's a big change. Yeah, you've seen the big picture.
You gotta see the big picture. So, yeah, I mean, you have to just surround yourself with people that are gonna push you to challenge yourself, and I mean, yeah, it's there's an element of uncertainty. You don't really know. Like when I went to college, I drove up by myself with my bags. Like, nobody came with me. I just figured it out, and I've done that. I joined a fraternity, which was really, for me, being like that Southern. I mean, my name is Juan Gonzales. I'm Southern, but it was. If you're not familiar with fraternities, they could be very segmented and, like, I don't know what the word is, but you got to it was very uncomfortable. You had to step out of your comfort zone. And I think anytime you do that, you step out of your comfort zone, you're going to be challenged, but you grow so much and you learn more about yourself. And, I am who I am today because of my own stepping out, but also, like, coming back to God. Like, you got to trust God's plan. And, I found Christ in high school, and that's something I took throughout college and still today. I mean, obviously, I'm always leaning back on that foundation. So I felt like God had a plan for me that was more than what my family's experience, and I kind of just chased after that. You can't. It's easy to take the easy road, and you gotta take the hard road most of the times. I mean,
and you're rewarded in the end because you got the beautiful fiance, and
that was luck. That was luck. That was luck.
Hey, what do they say? Luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I mean, if you plan to fail, you fail to plan. You fail to plan, you plan to fail. Sorry,
you
got that
sort
backwards.
of got that wrong, but
yeah. Wow, I didn't plan that out, so that's why I failed at it.
No, that's very true.
So yeah, I mean, it's awesome to. It's easy to take the status quo, and you just got to be the person that you want to be. Don't fall victim to easiness.
Yeah.
I've got tons of examples of friends who took that easy road and they're paying for it. So
yeah,
I mean,
Yeah, that's huge because we don't grow, like you said, we don't grow unless we challenge ourselves. Like,
right.
And you just see that in all walks of life. Like you don't really find out who you are until you question who you are, type thing. And
that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I love finding that out, like testing my faith with talking with atheists and having a civilized conversation, with them. You find out even more about your faith. But yeah, it's like that journey to Christ, basically chasing Christ. Everything else follows. He cuts those anchors away.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so key. And it's cool too, because I believe it, and I hope you believe it. In 10 years, I mean, you think you appreciate the choices you made now. In 10 years, I mean, you're going to really appreciate those choices, after you see even more of what the results of the choices have made.
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty awesome to think, like, think about like where you could be right now. And then like we all know like where you're going to be because we know you're a good friend of ours. And then like we see what you have in Christine too, and we know she's pursuing God like we've been talking about, and it's the perfect example of what dating should be, type thing.
You don't build a building on a foundation of like sand. You got to have a strong foundation, and you've got to always keep God at the center of it. Of all your decisions, of all your thoughts, really comes down to like the little things that matter. Because the second you don't, is when the enemy comes in and kind of takes over. And that goes for anything in life, making any kind of decision. Like you should never take it upon yourself to make the choice. Like always seek God first. And you'll be given. I believe you'll be given direction. And it's to surround yourself with the people that are going to push you to do that. If you don't, you're going to set yourself up for failure. I mean, sometimes it means losing friends. Sometimes it means being laughed at or looked at differently. But at the end of the day, the reward is greater than that. So, step out of your comfort zones a lot, as much as you can. It's my biggest word of advice. Like, if it's uncomfortable, it's right for you.
Yeah. So. Comes down to making that decision to be different.
Yeah. Yeah. Every decision is multiple decisions because you have to decide to decide. You have to say, I am going to make a change. This is the change I'm going to make.
No,
I'm going to be different. Yeah. And then I'm going to act, we may not realize it, but there's actually many different decisions involved, and at least try to make the first one. Try to make the mental willpower decision that I am going to do something, that I am going to find better friends or more friends, different friends that will challenge me, or community, or whatever it is, and then go do it. Go figure it out.
And then here's your security blanket is like, if things doesn't end up the way you want it to do, or it's like some terrible happens in your life, God still loves you. Doesn't matter what you decided to do. Doesn't matter what you did. God loves you, and that's your security blanket. That's all you need.
It's funny. I just looked down at this page, and the sentence I read was, "A man is never more a man than when he embraces an adventure beyond his control, or when he walks into a battle he isn't sure of winning." Like that's so true.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, and it goes on a little bit, as I recall, saying you really find out who you are when you don't know what to do.
Right.
When you haven't been through this yet, when you're out of solutions. I think every man is made to be some kind of problem solver. And I definitely see that in a magnified lens because I'm a civil engineer, and so as an engineer, you're a professional problem solver, basically, for a certain application. Most jobs are actually problem solving in some way. There's always problem. That's why you're professional. People come to you with some kind of problem.
That's why they pay you.
That's why they pay you. They don't just pay you to sit there and be on the computer. You got to be doing something.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's such a big key. Well, let's start to close down then with maybe final thoughts. Anything surrounding the book or anything that you want to say to the listeners?
Well, I'll go with something that we wanted to talk about, but didn't get to talk about was...
you can touch on that.
He comes through a perfect example that he puts in the book is from Good Will Hunting. And it's...
Great movie.
Yeah, it is, and I don't know if a lot of you've seen it, but if you haven't, you got to go see it. It's... Matt Damon is a troubled kid, and he shelters himself from the world. And there's a point in the movie where he's with Robin Williams, who's a psychiatrist, and Robin's just saying it's okay. And he kept saying it's not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your fault, with his arms wide open, going, and like Matt just from the movie
character
just breaks down crying, and it's like that is the perfect representative of what Christ is doing to us. Doesn't matter what you did, and that's what I was trying to say earlier. Doesn't matter what you did, like Christ is saying, I love you, it's okay, you're my son type thing, or you're my daughter type thing. So that's a huge takeaway, and that was one of my big takeaways, was just that image alone, because a lot of people don't understand that. Like, they figure they've done something and there's no coming back. There is. It's called Christ.
Yeah.
So
it's so good.
Yeah. I mean, our God is a passionate God and compassionate God, and like always have that to fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I would definitely recommend everyone read the book, give it a shot. And just don't be boring Christians. I think we talked. I don't know if we hit on that, but there's a part of the book where he talks about a boring Christian and the status quo. Like, step out of your comfort zone, challenge yourself in whatever ways, but always ask God what's next, and don't try to figure it out on your own, because you're gonna fail most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
that's so good. Yep. Only thing I would add to that, if I can't add anything, is just be the man that you've been called to be. Just step into that. You got to decide who you want to be, and then just live it out. Again, multiple decisions kind of wrapped in one.
Yeah, you got to answer the call.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good.
Oh, and find your beauty.
Find your beauty.
She's out there.
Believe it.
Be the person who you're looking for.
Is looking for.
Yeah.
That was a good study we did too.
Who was that?
Andy Stanley.
Andy Stanley. That's a great study.
New rules for love, sex, and dating, which I would say high schoolers should listen. I mean, we're young adults listening to that. I'd say it's applicable for high schoolers.
For sure.
Yeah.
Great series. Check it out. We checked it out for free. I don't think you have to bootleg it. I don't think.
No, it's online.
I like bootlegging things.
It's that sense of adventure. He's wild at heart.
Back in the day, man, it'd be all about LimeWire, trying to
LimeWire.
download. Yeah, I haven't heard that in a while, have you?
Napster.
Yeah.
Sweet guys, we'll be closing it down. Thank you guys for coming on the show. Thank you guys for investing your time in the next generation, and speaking life to the next generation, and inspiring others to think bigger and dream wider. So appreciate y'all.
We were meant to live for so much more. Have we lost ourselves? Somewhere we live inside.
I found the one that's funny. It says, there comes a moment when Costner buys the boy a pair of pants. But the boy won't change in front of him. He's a shy, timid boy who has yet to even smile in the story. Costner senses something's up. What's the matter? You don't want me to see your pecker? It's puny. What? It's puny? Who told you that? The boy Philip is silent. It is the silence of emasculation and shame. The absence of the father's voice is loud and clear. So Costner intervenes and speaks. Let me see. Go on. I'll shoot you straight. The boy reluctantly bears himself. No, Philip, that's a good size for a boy your age. A smile breaks out on his face like the sun coming up, and you know a major threshold has been crossed for him. I don't know how that works in today's society.
Don't know if we recommend that or not for masculation.
I mean, it's a father and a son. I get at some point that conversation probably comes up.
Well, it's really funny too, because one of the pastors at Seacoast, he's talked about on a podcast he's talked about how as a kid he did that with his father.
Right.
He just pulled down his pants and asked his dad about it.
Right. I mean, that question
maybe it's more normal than we think.
I think the question comes up at some point.
It just comes up.
Probably earlier and earlier.
Or at least thinking about doing that comes up.
I think that the father figure there is probably the best person to answer that question, and not someone
not
else.
Not a stranger.
That could go
definitely
way wrong,
not the mom,
not the
drunkle, not the teacher, not the pastor. You keep it.
What about the drunkle?
No,
Not the drunkle.
Not the drunkle.
No,
Just the father. So if you're going to do that, if you're thinking about doing that, and you were thinking about asking cousin Jack, don't ask cousin Jack.